Moshi Moshi.
Hello,
I'm Zeb Ramsbotham,
and I'm Annie Ramsbotham.
and we're the Rambling Ramsbothams.
Our journey might be rambling, but we hope this podcast isn't.
Welcome to episode 93
Oh my.
of the Rambling Ramsbotham podcast.
That's a lot. And look at if you're watching the YouTube, you can see our matching sweatshirts.
I know.
They have the logo on them.
A little bit of embroidery.
Yeah.
And some on the sleeves also.
If you listened, I guess, was that last week that I opened these? They came in the mail.
Yeah, I think it was last week.
So now I'm wearing them.
Both of them.
While we're talking about shameless self-promotion, you should join our newsletter if you haven't.
So on February 29th, we sent out our first newsletter, which includes basically a little recap from the past month. So what happened on the podcast, and it'll also include a link to one of Annie's YouTube videos and one of my blog posts, plus a secret.
Yeah. Last week's was a good one.
It was. Well, last month's.
Last month's.
Although it came out last week. And we'll send it at the end of every month. Mm-hmm. So the next one will come out towards the end of March.
Yeah.
So you have like 3 whole weeks to go to our website and sign up for our newsletter.
RamblingRamsbothams.com. You can also subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already. And if you're feeling like you want to, you could leave us a nice review and we'll read it on the podcast.
Yeah, that'd be friendly.
So, speaking of reading things, we do have an email from Cece. And do you want to read her email?
Yeah, so Cece said, Happy New Year, hope you all are well. There's a guy named Lee who lives in Wakayama, and he makes interesting videos about his home, farm, and activities. And she said, not sure if we follow him, and then sent some links. And we don't follow him.
Yeah.
But she said, anyway, he just struck me as someone you all might be interested in, maybe just from afar, but also maybe for a visit. He has a ryokan farm, a volunteering operation. He seems very active and interested in doing neat things.
I like neat things.
Yeah, and she said that her job had just ended recently, so she's between jobs and is going to go to his farm and volunteer for 3 weeks in Wakayama.
Which is pretty awesome.
That is really cool. And we looked at the links, and it looks really super interesting.
Yeah, so we didn't follow Lee, but then I really appreciated his website, and it's Ryunohara. So we'll link it in the show notes, but RYUNOHARA.com. If you want to look also, because the best part about the site actually, so it is like a very kind of natural farm living type feel on the website, but it seems like he has a pretty good sense of humor. At least the about page is my favorite, because he introduces the whole Ryunohara family, and it starts with the goats. For example, Deko is the chief executive goat. Makita is the assistant to the chief executive goat. But he names like all the chickens. The secretary generals are Hachi, Mochi, and Scratchy.
Are they chickens?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then senior Floofy or maybe sister Floofy and brother Goofy are some chicks. They're not hens. And then the best part is the 2 dogs. Mori her title is princess, and Ume is Mori's minion.
Wow.
Yeah.
Poor Ume.
Yeah, but actually, poor Ume got into a car accident based on this website. Little blurb about him.
Oh no.
I got into a car accident when I was 6 months old because I love to poop in the middle of the road. I lost my bottom right tooth and am half toothless as a result. Kind volunteers helped to pay for my broken right hand surgery. But unfortunately now he's afraid of people, moving things, and anything new. Please do not come to see me.
Oh.
So poor Ume, but...
rough life.
Yeah, but the rest of the animals seem very fun and friendly and ready to meet people, so you should check out that website.
And it does sound really neat, and it sounds like, if we didn't live in Japan, it sounds like something we'd be interested in, because we've done we've used Workaway in the past, so volunteering and traveling that way. So it's sounds like a really neat opportunity.
Woofing, what does woofing stand for? Worldwide?
It's like worldwide organic farming something.
Yeah. Workaway is kind of like that, where you don't get paid, but you are allowed to live, and usually you get fed.
Yeah.
But yeah, it sounds very cool. So thanks for sharing that, Cece. And also I appreciated the photo of you and your partner and your dogs. The dogs are very cute.
Yeah. Well, we had a fairly eventful last week. So Annie was actually gone pretty much the whole week. She was in Gunma doing her thing for for work, but we had a couple friends visit.
Yeah.
Which was really nice.
I was sad that I missed them, but it was one of your good friends from undergrad or just grad school?
From undergrad.
And grad school, I guess. No? Well, anyway.
No, just undergrad. I mean, we met in undergrad, and then after undergrad, actually connected to Workaway. I was doing Workaway in Iceland, and I was actually working on a dog sledding kennel, and she was going to go do Workaway in Finland and also work with sled dogs, actually. But she came through Iceland, and we did the ring road together, and then went to Norway for some hiking and camping.
Yeah.
And that was like 2014. And then the last time you and I saw her was in Austria.
Yeah. Austria, when we got engaged, it was winter and we had gotten engaged, and she and her now husband got engaged that same trip. So that was kind of a fun little overlap in Austria. But
they live in Australia, which is really interesting because as Americans, we think, like, you know, I guess I assumed that Australia and Japan were fairly close to each other. But
like
they're
physically.
Really, yeah, but they're not.
Yeah.
The travel time between, I think it's almost a longer travel time between Australia and Japan than it is between Japan and America. Mm-hmm. So they had, but it's really interesting because it's the same time zone. I think they were 1 hour off.
Mm-hmm. Different season, I guess, because they're in the southern hemisphere.
Yeah, they're down there in summertime. But I think, yeah, it's interesting because you think it's like super close.
Yeah, I did at least.
But it's not.
Things are misleading, like on the big school maps, you know, when you like pull them down in front of the chalkboard and everything looks like it's all tucked in real close when you put it on a flat map like that.
Yeah. But anyway, they came to visit, which was really nice. They came to do some skiing here in Japan, and then they came over to Kanazawa to hang out. And yeah, overall, it was just really nice to see them and catch up. And it was really fun to hang out in the city. They kind of kept like apologizing for, like, you know, in air quotes, like making me do touristy things and kind of show them around the city. But I really did keep telling them that it really is just fun to hang out. Like, Kanazawa was a really fun city to hang out in. And it was really nice because they were both like pretty low key. So I was able to just make suggestions kind of based on what I wanted to do, but also what I thought that they would want to do because they were like fun activities.
So as Kanazawa tourists for the day, where did you take them?
So it was really fun. So at first I met them Thursday night, and we just went to a yakiniku place and had dinner. And then Saturday was actually pretty funny. They came out to Uchinada, and we had breakfast from the local bakery. And then we went back into Kanazawa for
Did you go see the ocean while they were out here?
No, we like talked about it.
Yeah.
But then they were like, they live in Australia.
Oh, yeah.
So they've
seen this water.
Well, they were also like...
They haven't seen this water. This is the other side.
No, but then they asked, they were like, is it a nice beach? And I was like, well, it's one of Japan's top 100 beaches. And then they were kind of like joking about it. And they were like, yeah, maybe we don't need to see it. They're like, they have like world-class beaches in Australia that they live like right next to.
There's nothing wrong. Like, the Uchinada beach is cute and quaint, but yeah, it's not like
I think the nail in the coffin was they asked if people swim here often, and I was kind of like, no, not really. And so they were kind of like, I think our beaches, I think we're good.
And it's like they came at the end of February, which is not ideal beach weather in this hemisphere.
But yeah, so they came to Uchinada. We had coffee and breakfast from the bakery. And then we went back into town we went to see Oyama Jinja. Mm-hmm. We we walked through the castle park. Then we saw Kenroku-in and Higashi-Chaya. And what else did we do?
These are all very good things. Oyama Jinja, in case you haven't heard us say this before, Jinja means shrine, so that's one of the most like well-known shrines, I guess, in Kanazawa. It's right next to the castle. It's
where the Maeda family is enshrined.
Yeah, it's one of the prettiest ones, I think. And then Higashi-Chaya is one of the 3 tea districts, and Nagamachi is like samurai kind of area.
Yeah, so we saw Nagamachi. And then we had dinner at like a really nice izakaya, which actually is the same one that we had dinner at with your family. Ah. It was really fun.
Nice.
So yeah, it was just really nice to catch up with them and just kind of spend a day.
What was the best thing that you ate?
That's a good question. Maybe the mackerel. We ordered like
I do like mackerel.
Well, we ordered like a grilled mackerel, and it was like you get the whole fish.
Oh, really?
You know, and it was really good.
Interesting. Like with the head and everything, and you just kind of have to like pick at it at the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it was really tasty, and Her husband was pretty funny because he was saying that he really likes like whole fish meals, and he'll often even
He's
order
a fisherman. So
Yeah,
he's
so it was
probably
really
used to
funny
that.
because we walked through Omicho Market and he recognized like all the fish that we saw in Omicho Market, but of course he knows, what they call them in Australia.
The English name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't.
Maybe it's different.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know actually.
Yeah, so
It's kind of like how American English and British English are.
yeah, I
kind
didn't
of
want
like,
to say he knows what they call them in English because I was like, well, maybe in America we would have a different term for the same
like
fish.
cookies and crackers.
Yeah, but yeah, it was really fun, and that might have been my favorite thing. But I did have some really nice stuff on Saturday from a bakery.
Really nice stuff like bread.
Yeah, cardamom roll,
Oh.
cinnamon roll. There was a chocolate bread thing, and then I got that loaf of bread that we had.
Oh yeah,
later.
you did. You shared that one with me. That was good. It had walnuts in it.
Yeah, but I thought I would maybe try and think about a few things that I did that we haven't talked about so much before, just to switch it up, to maybe give some recommendations. So one of my favorite things was the Shintate Bake Store, which Shintate is that street we talked about maybe a few episodes ago that had the really hip third wave coffee shop. And
The, like air quotes hipster district of Kanazawa.
it's pretty hip.
Might
But-
not be the hipster district, but yeah, everything over there felt
Maybe,
pretty
yeah.
like young and yeah,
Yeah, but the Shintate Bake Store is where...
it's tasty.
Yeah, it was really good. I liked it a lot. I would definitely go for the chocolate roll again if I went back. Mostly because when I picked it up, it was very dense and heavy. And it was like packed. There was so much chocolate and it was crazy.
Sounds good.
So the Shintate Bake Store, the restaurant we went to is called Izakaya Hanagumi. And that's kind of it's in Kurinbo, so kind of the hip eating area. Really cool izakaya, so if you have a chance, you should make a reservation there. And then Kurinbo's Mr. Donuts.
Wow, really just
Yeah, because
never heard of that before.
it's basically,
I'm just kidding.
I was going to say, like, I guess
It's like Krispy Kreme
yeah,
or
Krispy
Dunkin'
Kreme or Dunkin'
Donuts.
Donuts. If you know what either of those things are, or maybe in Canada, I've never been to a Tim Hortons, but I think
Oh,
that's
yeah.
kind of Canada's Dunkin' Donuts.
Is Mr. Donuts not outside of Japan?
I don't
Is
know.
it just a Japanese chain?
I think it's a Japanese chain. If you've seen a Mr. Donuts outside of Japan, let us know. But if you come to Japan, then try Mr. Donuts. It's kind of, yeah, it's obviously in the name.
It's just donuts.
It's got donuts.
It's delicious.
But they also have good coffee, and they
Yeah.
do kind of like seasonal things. So if you're like, oh, Starbucks is too international, I want
Wow.
the Japan, the real Japan.
Wow.
Go to Mr. Donuts.
Wow.
And you'll be in
Anyway.
there with a bunch of high schoolers.
Yeah,
and-
that's true. It is really popular with like high school, and it's cheaper than Starbucks.
And they do fun seasonal stuff and collaborations. Like this time when I was in there, I was hoping they would have a Pokemon collaboration going, but they didn't. Instead, they had their Sakura donuts. And
I can't wait. I know it's like kind of a cheesy thing, but I can't wait for all the Sakura flavored things to be coming
yeah.
out.
And my friend Anna, she got Kori Kohi, which we were
What
both
is
confused
that?
about. And I could read the kanji, and it was Kori, like ice.
Oh.
So I was like, I'm pretty sure it's going to be an iced coffee.
And it wasn't?
We had both talked about how we wanted like a warm drink, so I got the like double espresso latte or something, and she got the Kori Kohi, and when it came, apparently it's a very popular drink. I think it said maybe the popularity started in Vietnam. It was somewhere in Southeast Asia, but it's an iced coffee, but the ice cubes themselves are coffee.
Oh.
So it's frozen coffee, and then they're supposed to pour like warm milk over it, and then slowly the
Sounds
coffee
tasty.
melts into the milk. But it was kind of a bummer because it was like a really cold day, and then she had this like iced coffee drink.
So it probably never melted.
I mean, it did. We were drinking it inside, but it was kind of like, she wanted
still fun,
something to
though.
warm up. But we had donuts, which warmed us up. Yeah, it was just like a really good day, and it was fun to just hang out. And it was nice to see their kind of excitement to be in Kanazawa and see things that I'm also still really excited about seeing, like Kinroku and stuff like that.
It is fun to like show people around somewhere and be excited because they're excited.
Yeah, and then it kind of made me think about how, like, I guess they were worried that that I was just gonna take him to, in air quotes, like super touristy places. But it did remind me that Kenroku or like Kanazawa is really, there are a lot of tourists that come here, but nothing is overcrowded. I would say maybe occasionally Higashichaya feels a little cramped, just because sometimes the street is like so full of people. But really,
and Kenroku can feel crowded too, but
it can if you go at like a really popular time. Or the only time I felt it was crowded was when we went for that nighttime cherry blossom illumination. That was crowded.
But it is nice that there's not. I can't really think of a place in Kanazawa that only tourists go. There are places that are crowded because they're fun to go to, and there isn't a place that's like a tourist trap that I can think of, or, a place that locals wouldn't want to go. Like, maybe they don't want to go to Higashichaya all the time, or Kenroku all the time,
yeah, but they would still pop over there to go, like, a coffee shop, or to do, I don't know, something fun. And, yeah, it is, I don't think that Kanazawa really has a tourist trap.
Not one that we found, at least.
And, yeah, but even then, like, we did go into some kutaniyaki shops and some kind of secondhand shops, and none of them really feel like overpriced. Like often there's not a massive difference in how much you're paying. It's not like, oh, this is like a tourist trap because this kutaniyaki is 3 times as expensive as on like the back street over there.
Sure.
For the most part, it seems like everything's pretty reasonable. Yeah.
That's fun. I liked seeing the photos.
Yeah, it was really, really good time. But on the topic of tourism, should you call Kanazawa Little Kyoto?
I think I sent you this article. It's on the kanazawatourism.net, which I don't think that's...
I don't think this is an official website.
No, I think it's just a blog.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because the guy lives in Kanazawa. But he had kind of maybe an opinion piece about how he doesn't like...
He seems quite opinionated.
Yeah, but that's fine. I mean...
yeah,
we're
everyone
opinionated.
Has opinions. Yeah.
That's all we talk about on this thing is just our opinions.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was talking... I just thought it was an interesting perspective because I have heard the term like Little Kyoto thrown around for a couple of cities, like not just Kanazawa. And I always thought it was kind of a helpful reference, I guess, for someone who's not as familiar with Japan, and they're like, oh, it's like Little Kyoto, and maybe you picture Kyoto in your head so you can picture that town.
Yeah, I always thought it was like a generic description that basically means there's some cultural sites there.
Yeah, like
and
there's
some
temples and shrines.
Yeah, I never took it literally. It's
no.
like a miniature version of Kyoto.
But I did hear it enough that I was like, why is everything a Little Kyoto? Like, why are there several Little Kyotos?
I did think at first that because in reading kind of English websites and reading marketing, even when we planned our honeymoon in Japan, we would read that Kanazawa is Little Kyoto. And so I thought, honestly, it was a Kanazawa thing. And then when we moved to Japan and I was looking for cities to travel to just for us when we were going on little vacations, that's when I started to see like a lot of other cities that called themselves Little Kyoto. And I was like, wait a minute.
Well, so I learned on this blog like last week that there's a National Kyoto Conference, and it was established in 1985, and the members, if you're a member city, and I don't know what qualifies you having streets with similar appearances to Kyoto, but you can join as a member, and then you're allowed to call yourself Little Kyoto, which apparently improves your city's brand image. I guess if you're a smaller city and you kind of want to piggyback off of one of the most popular cities in Japan, that makes sense. But as of June 2020, according to the National Kyoto Conference website, 41 cities were members. So that's a lot of Little Kyotos scattered around. It's almost one per prefecture.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder, is it a trademarked term?
Well, maybe. I mean, yeah, you're not allowed to call yourself that. I'm assuming, maybe not, but like I assume member cities would have to like pay into this conference or at least do some kind of formal joining.
But what does it get them?
Like, I don't know, kind of like clout.
Yeah, I've just never heard of this conference before.
So specifically...
maybe it's a popular thing in Japan, though, because this is a Japanese blog and we were using Google Translate to read it. And he was kind of like, if you're familiar with tourism, you're probably aware. And we were kind of like, well, we're familiar with tourism. Never heard of this before.
Well, we clearly are only familiar with like tourism as Western tourists.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So maybe in Japan, like the Kyoto conference and Little Kyoto is like a bigger deal.
It would be more obvious to them.
Yeah, from the outside, we're kind of like, everywhere's Little Kyoto.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Well, so specifically Kanazawa was a member when this conference was established in 1985, but it withdrew from membership in 2008, which is a long time ago. That's like pre-Shinkansen by like 7 years before the Shinkansen reached Kanazawa. And
yeah, maybe they withdrew because they were like,
it's
not really helping us. Like,
maybe.
we haven't seen an increase in visitors, and why are we?
I don't know. Maybe the membership fee was expensive. I don't know. I don't even know if there is a membership fee, but the blog, so in his opinion, he was talking about how people who know both Kyoto and Kanazawa he says they'll know that they're not similar at all, which I don't know if I would go that far, but he did have an interesting point that Kyoto has a culture of court nobles, and its roads have kind of a grid layout, like a checkerboard. But then Kanazawa, on the other hand, was a samurai society, so not necessarily the same kind of makeup historically. And I don't know if he says because of that, the winding roads, the narrow winding roads are still there. I don't know what that has to do with samurai society, but
easier to defend, or I don't know. It's like wasn't as well thought out. I don't know.
Either way, I mean, I don't know why that's the case, but it is the case that in the samurai district and in a lot of places in Kanazawa, the roads are kind of curved and winding. It's not super checkerboard layout. So I really have only been to Kyoto 3 times, I think. And so I'm not as familiar with it, but it does have a much more, like, you could just walk straight across the city.
Yeah, I think that this is where I felt like he has like a really interesting point about the key differences in the city. But then this is where I thought maybe he was like splitting hairs a little bit, because I always thought of Little Kyoto being more as like a reference point and not a direct comparison, where he seems to be taking it as people are making this direct comparison, and he's like, they're not similar at all. Like, we have winding roads and they have a checker, and I'm like,
that makes sense. Like, it's not like a city miniature.
Yeah, it's not like I never took it as a direct comparison. I think we're not literally saying that Kanazawa is a small version of Kyoto. We're just saying that it shares similar attractions in terms of maybe there's like historical architecture here. There's a really good food culture here. You can see a lot of neat like cultural things here and traditional crafts. It shares some of the same elements. Where this guy, I feel like he was getting a little like, like we have our own identity. Like, we're not similar at all.
I do agree with that though. Like, I agree that maybe they don't want to be Little Kyoto because they just want to be Kanazawa. Like, if you're Little Kyoto, maybe that makes it seem like you don't have any of your own things to offer. So the best you can do is be like, you should come here because it's kind of like a knockoff Kyoto. I know that's a bit of a extreme take, but maybe they're saying like, we don't want to be that. We just want to be known for being Kanazawa. Yeah,
it makes me wonder more about the National Kyoto Conference, because I assumed it seems like Little Kyoto is more of a designator from kind of like a Western point of view, because many Americans, if you mention Kyoto, they might have, definitely more than Kanazawa, they could maybe picture, maybe they've heard, oh, Kyoto is a very historical place. And so it seems very easy to explain to a Westerner, oh, the city that we live near is like a Little Kyoto.
Yeah.
And it kind of gives them like a reference point.
Like for outbound tourism more.
Yeah, where it's interesting then that he's kind of like writing from this perspective of tourism within Japan. I know if you're familiar with tourism, you'll know about the National Kyoto Conference, where it's like, do you need to tell Japanese people that Kanazawa is a Little Kyoto? Maybe they don't know anything about Kanazawa, and they also need a just generic like reference point. Because like obviously we wouldn't say Kanazawa is a Little Tokyo. Yeah, because then if you said Little Tokyo, they would think, oh, it's like a tiny little like metropolis, and it's like cutting edge and high tech.
It's interesting though, because I mean, I guess that's maybe not obvious. Like you were like, oh, obviously we wouldn't call it that, but yeah.
Yeah, that's why we need that reference point.
Yeah, so let us know, I guess, if you've heard cities in Japan being referred to as Little Kyoto, and what you think about it.
if you live somewhere in America or like anywhere in the world and you live in a little whatever.
That's true.
Because I was
Is
trying to
there
think
like Little New York or like
little New
LA?
Orleans. Yeah, I don't know.
Although I guess kind of on a slightly different thing, that's kind of what Americans in general did when they left England. Like New York is literally just New York.
Well, I mean, we just kept the names.
I
It's
know,
like there's
but
like
it's
a
kind of
London
like-
in Tennessee or something. Like,
Yeah, we just moved over and then we're like, all right, well, this will be York now.
yeah, we just like the names.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like
Well-
an interesting point to think about. Yeah, is it okay to call something Little Kyoto? But I definitely agree with them that, I mean, I definitely prefer Kanazawa to Kyoto. So I think, yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's a demeaning thing.
No,
though.
I don't think it's like offensive or anything, but I agree that it does feel better when someone just calls it Kanazawa because it's kind of promoting that Kanazawa has its own things to offer.
Yeah. So I looked up and I found on this other, I was kind of like curious, like where, if this is like really being used out there.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a funny Japan Today article that was about Kanazawa deserves more recognition than its nickname Little Kyoto warrants.
See? Yeah.
So it was kind of similar gist about how Kanazawa is more than just the Little Kyoto, which I definitely agree with. But then this led me into this whole idea about kind of tourism vocabulary and how we discuss tourism, because there were a lot of comments that were pretty funny, and some of them, the one that really got me, was referring to Kanazawa as a quaint little city and a hidden gem. And if you listen to our podcast where we talked about clickbait and, language surrounding people's videos and how they advertise certain things or like their travel, it's kind of been this idea I've been thinking about for a while. It's like tourism vocabulary and how we talk about tourism. Because it kind of made me think like, well, is Kanazawa a quaint little city? Mm-hmm. And
it's all relative, I guess.
Yeah. So it's just tricky. So thinking about like tourism vocabulary, I started like looking into it and trying to find out like, why do we talk about travel the way that we talk about it? Mm-hmm. And this is obviously
like,
something.
Why does everyone want to find like off the beaten path, hidden gems, like discover?
And why do we say that?
Yeah.
Like, why do we call it that? And this is like obviously probably something that's like someone's multiple people's PhD like thesis. Like people have probably written, of course, books about this. And there's some really interesting articles, mostly talking about like ethnic food, for example. Like why do we...
Like the phrase ethnic food.
Yeah, like why do we call it ethnic food and how it can be maybe problematic to describe food as ethnic, particularly because we usually only call ethnic food if it's food that's cooked by the brownest and poorest people. Then it becomes, it's like ethnic food. And she also was talking about how writers often use cliches, like being the only non-local eating there. And it's funny because that's like definitely applicable to here in Japan. So for example, like what I was just talking about, like quaint little city and hidden gem, you also will often see Google reviews, and we've joked about on this podcast before, about, I was like the only white person in here.
Yeah.
And
like why do you need to add that detail?
Yeah. It's like this badge of honor, or kind of like, for some reason they thinking it's giving this and this is like another slippery word, authenticity. It's like making their experience more authentic because there were no other foreigners there. Which I think is funny because sometimes it's like, well, the person sitting next to you is probably like Filipino, but you think, or you just can't tell. So you're like...
And when you said you were quoting someone, we'll link the article in the show notes, but it's a Washington Post article, an opinion piece by Lavanaya Ramanthan, and she was saying that why everyone should stop calling immigrant food ethnic. Was her opinion piece. Yeah,
because she was specifically talking about how, like, I think in America, we talk about ethnic cuisine, and it kind of, you have an image that pops up in your head, and it's probably not Scandinavian. Like, you're probably thinking of, like, Indian food.
Right, and it's kind of like, why is that? Yeah, and I guess there are other problematic words that, like, they just seem slightly snobbish if you talk about not all the time, but sometimes when people use things like describing as a hidden gem or off the beaten path, it doesn't always come across negative, but sometimes it can feel kind of like, well, I was traveling the right way and I was having a real travel experience, and it's kind of snobbish for no reason. Like,
it's like you have some
gatekeeping.
Yeah, or like you have some like moral superiority because instead of walking down the main road, you walk down the road adjacent to the main road.
Which just to be clear, I don't think there's anything wrong with, like, I think, like, the air quotes off the beaten path travel. Like, I think it's good to try to find things that are like lesser visited, less crowded, to kind of disperse mass tourism. I think it's great. The thing that gives me the weird feelings is when people describe it like it's some kind of like award they should get for like discovering something new or being this like it's because if something's out of the way, it could be out of the way, but you probably didn't find it. Like, you probably weren't the first person to discover it, is what I'm saying. Like, maybe it's new for you, but it's not new for all the locals that are regulars there.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I don't know enough about it to really talk too much about it, but I did find it interesting that there were a lot of articles that were pointing towards some of the original travel writing has its roots kind of in this colonial era where it was really people in the military.
Like conquesting.
Yeah, I guess like conquistadors. It was really people in the military or, people that were heavily involved in colonialism. They were going off and they were the explorers, and that they would write these reports about where they went. And so some people were saying that the modern travel writing, at least in the Western culture, has its roots kind of in this like colonialism. And I don't know enough about that to really talk too much about it, but it does make sense. So then we were kind of joking about like, does a Japanese traveler go to Las Vegas and are they like, I had the authentic American experience, or like I found this hidden gem off the Las Vegas Strip? It's kind of stuff like that. Like, I wonder how because we're obviously very white and Western, and it makes me wonder about how other cultures, what their travel writing looks like.
Like, I wonder if people would go to America to where, like, Appalachian area where we're from and be like, I want to go to Appalachia because it's off the beaten path. Yeah. Or is that just like a thing that Westerners do? Yeah,
and then we also joked about this, that like, and I'm sure that I've been guilty of using the phrase off the beaten path, but it makes me think about, when I talk about being off the beaten path in Japan, or I think about some of the places that we've been that have been pretty rural, it's like if I did that in America, I would use the phrase middle of nowhere, almost like as a bad thing.
Oh, really?
Not really as a bad thing, but if someone went to Moxville, like
that you got lost and you didn't really
or like if someone went to Moxville or like Tuxedo, where you and I like grew up respectively, they'd probably be like, man, this place is in the middle of nowhere.
Right, because there's nothing really to do.
Yeah, there's like nothing really happening there. But when we go to Japan's version of that, I guess because to us it's new and unique and special, we're like, we're really like, we're off the beaten path.
Yeah, I guess, like, why does that feel like some secret discovery or, like, sacred? Like, wow. Yeah, I mean, it is something that I want to be more careful about myself, because I'm sure that I've done that before where I probably used kind of, like, weird words instead of just being like, this bar was really cozy and, like, it was a beautiful place. Like, I just want to make sure that I don't say things that are like, I was the only foreigner there. Like, I discovered this place, Yeah,
so there's this weird like travel vocabulary, travel lexicon that we break out where, if we were in America and we went to a park in a town, we might, man, this is a really nice park. But if we go to a park in Japan, all of a sudden it becomes a hidden gem. It's like, well, it's just a park.
But yeah, I mean, again, there's nothing against like traveling to lesser known places.
No,
it's
and I
just
guess
the
like
descriptive terms that we use to describe those.
Yeah, like you should just get on a train and take the train to who knows where.
At the same time, though, like the air quotes touristy places, like the most visited places, are popular for a reason, and there's also nothing wrong with liking those. Like if somebody's like, I really liked the Louvre in France, then sorry, I had a little blank there.
Where's the Louvre?
I've
the
actually
Louvre.
never been to the Louvre.
Neither have I.
But like, there's nothing wrong.
We have been to Paris though, and it was a terrible experience.
Oh well, that's a
Paris.
Unfair thing to say, but
it's because it wasn't off the beaten path enough.
Wow.
There was no hidden gem in Paris.
Okay. No, but I'm just saying that if you go to something that's really touristy, there's no shame in being like, yeah, I really enjoyed that #1 tourist attraction. And also I think that you can get unique and personal experiences anywhere. Like I think people try to search for these less crowded experiences because then maybe you will have kind of a deeper experience or more human connection. But you can find that connection and that experience anywhere, like in downtown Tokyo if you wanted to.
Yeah.
You know? And so I guess it's kind of, we talked about this before, but if you're looking to like check off boxes and you're not really looking for a serendipitous thing, you're just like, tell me what the most remote place is. I want to get out and like really get into deep Japan.
Yeah,
like,
so you can go there and like take an Instagram photo and like yeah, it's tricky. And I think, you know, that's part of the reason I guess why I do think it's nice that people, for instance, like our podcast, and I think it's something that we like is we really are pretty into pretty mundane things, which I think is like a funny description of our podcast. And I always think about that review. But I don't know. I think that's like my favorite thing is like you can go to an obscure place in Tokyo and appreciate it, but you're probably not going to have some like mind-blowing epiphany. But you can have a lot of fun just thinking about, oh, like I wonder what people in this part, like what do these people do? Like where's their cafe at?
Yeah, you can have a meaningful experience anywhere, like on any mundane street. But yeah, just something that I personally want to like be mindful of and better about, I guess, in all my travels, not just Japan.
Yeah, it's definitely, and then that's another thing we kind of like talked about, but was this idea of, do people do this in Europe? Which I think they do. I think people look for the off the beaten path in Europe, but I think we're just especially sensitive to it here in Japan because we live here and it's funny to read travel writing about where you live and see, when people describe the city we live next to as a quaint little city and a real hidden gem.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, all right,
I've
buddy.
discovered Kanazawa, and it's like we discovered a place where like 150,000 people
500,000
people
there are like a lot of people that live here. So yeah, it's definitely just, I guess, just me being more mindful or thinking more about, I guess, being slightly more intentional about the way I describe things, the way I talk about things.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully this doesn't sound like a rant or anything.
I guess it's slightly a rant.
Oh.
But, I mean, this is kind of just a rambling topic. But yeah, just kind of like an interesting thought about travel writing and, how we...
Yeah, let us know what you guys think. Like, if you've seen this in other countries where you live or you've visited. I've just seen it a lot in Japan specifically. A lot of that kind of language. But speaking of...
You have some mundane life news.
Speaking of paths... mountain bike paths. I got to go mountain biking on some real life
I would really call
trails.
it more of like a trail, like an off the beaten trail.
Really off the beaten trail.
Yeah.
I really got off the road into the woods.
Okay.
Anyway, enough of that. I was in Kiryu, Gunma, near Takasaki is the biggest city that's near, I guess. And I was doing some work there, but I got to borrow a friend's bike and ride mountain bike trails, and it was so fun because it's actually, this is kind of crazy to think this, but it's the first time I've been mountain biking in Japan, and we've been here for a year and a half, and mountain biking, until we moved to Japan, was a pretty big part of my life.
Yeah. It's not the first trail that you've ridden?
No, I've ridden...
It's the first proper mountain bike ride you've been on.
I've ridden my gravel bike on trails, which isn't really the same. And I got to ride mountain bike trails when we visited home, so I've gotten to ride mountain bikes during the past year and a half, but anyway, this was really fun. It was, so like I said, it was in Kiryu, and it was cool because it was a free network of trails that's open to hikers and bikers. And if you're an American, especially like from the Southeast where we were from in America.
Really almost anywhere in America.
I guess so. There's a ton of mountain bike options.
West, Southeast.
Yeah, and you might be thinking of like national forests or state parks. Often these are free to the public. You just show up with your bike. Some of them you can even ride horses and mountain bikes and hiking all on the same, like miles and miles of trails for free. And that kind of system just doesn't really exist yet in Japan. And I guess that could be a whole other topic on theoretical reasons why. But those have contributed to why I haven't been able to ride mountain bikes here. I don't own a mountain bike right now. And I guess from us in Ishikawa Prefecture, the closest option would be Hakuba, which is in Nagano Prefecture. So it's a couple-hour drive, and then it is, like most mountain bike options, it's a ski resort that you can ride bikes on the lift access trails in the non-snowy months, which is fine, but it's not really cross-country riding, and it's not free.
And it's also not really quite downhill riding. Like, if you look at videos and photos of it, it's pretty interesting that even somewhere like Beach Mountain in, like, the United States,
which that's a very niche, like, small...
I know, super niche, but I guess that's my point, is that this is, like, one of the premier places to do this in Japan, and, like, kind of, like, a little... Not that Beach Mountain's not great, but kind of just a little local ski resort with lift access for mountain biking would blow people out of the water. Like, if people that have ridden Hakuba got to go to Beach Mountain, they'd probably be like, oh my God. Like,
I guess, but I mean, we can't say that because we've never been to Hakuba, but I don't know, it's not the style of mountain biking that I prefer. I guess I was just looking for somewhere I could just ride a cross-country mountain bike, which is fine. But yeah, for, I guess, example, if you're wanting numbers to compare, it's 4,800 yen for the day for a ticket, or 41,000 yen for the season, which is about $272. Not crazy for a season pass, but it doesn't include the gas and the toll roads for us to drive there. I don't have a bike, so if I wanted to rent a bike, it's like 8,800 yen or 10,000 yen, so like almost $100. No, like $75 for the day.
It's a lot.
It's a lot if I wanted to do that every day.
And then you need a place to stay, and then you're thinking about, like, meals. I don't know.
So, yeah, I don't want to, like, complain, but it's just that's what kind of the reality is of options for downhill mountain biking or for mountain biking in general. But there is promising stuff happening in Japan around mountain biking. It's kind of slow, and I guess I'm impatient because I came from a pretty good mountain bike area in North Carolina. But, for example, Yamanashi Prefecture, not really that close to us, but it's on the Tokyo side. Minami Alps, which is in Yamanashi Prefecture, has a pretty cool cross-country mountain bike scene that's building that's really tight with the community, and so they're building it in kind of conjunction with that town, which is really cool.
Yeah, there are a lot of really neat initiatives, and it's really interesting because it's what I imagine mountain biking, like, in the early 80s was like in America. Probably. That it was kind of this, like, quirky, weird thing, people spending time in the woods on bikes, like, what are you really doing? It's kind of like that in Japan, that these bike communities and trails are starting to open, but in reality, like, you'll look into it and you'll read about, like, this is the premier place to go cross-country mountain biking in Japan, and then you look and they have, like, 5 to 10 kilometers of trail, like 3 to 6 miles.
It's slowly growing. But yeah, also in Ibaraki Prefecture, there's something like that going on. But there tends to be a lot of red tape that people run into when they're passionate about mountain biking, and then they try to get permission to build trails, and then kind of, I don't know, I guess because people, if they aren't mountain bikers, they might be like, why would we want to introduce that when you could just hike? Like, when you could have something that's less...
Yeah, or it's something we should look into for the future, for a future topic, but kind of like the access to public land in Japan, I think it's a little bit different. It's viewed a little differently here than in America, where there's, like, so much land, and public land really is kind of like, you can go out there and kind of do whatever.
Yeah, maybe so. Well, to bring it back to Gunma, where I was, in Kiryu, where they have those trails that are open to the public, some of them are on, like, kind of a community park area, but a lot of them are on a private land where the landowner is fine with people just building trails, doing whatever. And the reason he's fine is because it's a cedar and hinoki forest that he logs for lumber. And so what my friend was telling me, he was showing me the trails, and he lives there, and he builds some of the trails himself in his free time. He was saying that, I guess the landowner's opinion was like, just don't touch my trees and you can do whatever you want. Like, I don't care if you're out here, but because all he wants is the trees.
Yeah.
So if more partnerships could happen like that, that could be interesting. But that is also very friendly of that guy, because I could also see why someone would be like, yeah, don't go in my forest. Like, I'm going to have a bunch of machinery. I need to log it. Like, I don't want people in there.
I guess there is some issue with, like, liability. Like, what if they start logging it, but there are people in there riding?
Right.
Or what if someone crashes out there and gets hurt? Like, yeah. It's an interesting topic, I guess, that has a lot of stuff wrapped up into it.
Yeah, but it's cool to see Kiryu and Gunma start to kind of have the small but growing amount of free trails for people. And as an aside, it's adjacent to mountain biking, but in Hida in Gifu Prefecture, which is much closer to us, it's not technically mountain biking, but there's this thing that you can do in Hida called Rail MTB Gatan Go. And it's a very long name, but essentially they've taken an old railway that still has the tracks on it, and they've built these bike cart things where there's one bike on each of the rails of the train track, and you pedal along the train track. It's like fixed. The bike can't fall off.
Yeah.
And you just tour through the valley. It sounds so fun. Zeb was like, I am not interested, but I think it sounds like a blast.
Well, it's like sitting on a stationary trainer, except it does move.
It's not stationary.
I know, but it's like the same idea of like sitting on a trainer.
I think it's really cool. So
I think it sounds interesting.
The website says the mechanism is very simple. 2 mountain bikes are fixed to the guide roller with a metal frame that was originally produced locally. The rear wheel is faced on the surface of the rail directly so that you can go forward safely and smoothly by pedaling. Sounds awesome.
Thank goodness. That's all I need in life.
Well, it's like, it's kind of like train travel, but even slower and exercise. Like, it's just a scenic journey through the canyon.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I would give it a try.
Yeah. Well,
I would have low expectations.
It opens March 30th for anyone listening who's going to be in the Gifu area.
And it's off the beaten path. It's a real hidden gem.
Okay. Anyway.
You won't see many other people out there. Well, have fun. I forgot about this cycling adjacent news.
Oh, really?
Well, I just found a team to join.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to be on, I think at some point I decided that I maybe wasn't going to do much racing this year, but then I saw that there are 2 hill climbs that actually I enjoyed doing it last year, and I would like to do it again this year just to have like a goal and have something to like train for. So I decided to join one of the local teams. So I'm not going to do like the Japan Pro Tour, but I will do like a local team thing and then go do a couple hill climbs this year. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
You liked your team last year, but since you're not planning on doing as many races, the investment's not worth it to like rejoin for this season.
The style of racing just wasn't like for me. I found that I wasn't as excited about that style of racing. Like, I was more excited about training and being part of a team than actually going to the race. Where the hill climbs, I'm actually pretty excited about doing them because
you do like climbing.
Yeah, so that'll be fun.
I'm excited for you. Do you have a word of the week?
I do. It's also cycling related.
Oh my.
My word of the week is ishidatami.
Ishidatami? I don't know. Ishi like stone?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what datami is.
Neither do I.
Is it tatami?
No. Ishidatami is like cobblestones.
Oh, okay.
So last weekend was, actually now 2 weekends ago, was opening weekend. So it's kind of the first World Tour racing that happens in Europe. And it was the Cobbled Classics, Omloop Het Nieuwsblad, and Kurne Brussels Kurne. And so they're on cobbled roads, or they have cobbled roads. So ishidatami is cobblestones.
Very nice.
Yeah.
My word is urudoshi, and it means leap year.
Oh.
Because we forgot last week.
Yeah.
Leap day was last week.
Well, I forgot that it was like a leap day until I went to like Google. And it had like the leap day thing. And I was like, oh, yeah.
Well, when you write urudoshi, I don't know why. Uru is in hiragana, so it's the letters, like uru. And then doshi is toshi, the kanji for year, but when you put it together, it changes to doshi. But I was reading about, I was actually trying to figure out what uru means, because let me know if you're listening and you know what it means. I don't know what uru means, but I was trying to find out, and this other blog was saying that in Japan, there's a specific law about calculating your age, and basically you become a year older on the day before your actual birthday. I've never heard that, but the law is Nenrei keisan ni kansuru horitsu daiko, which is like a very long law name. So I guess at 11:59 the previous day is when you become that next year older. So even if you were born on February 29th, you still become a year older on February 28th every year. So the blog was saying, like, I guess it's fair for even leap year babies.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I guess so.
Interesting.
Except, what if you were born on... So no one then would be born on February 29th. Like, if you were March 1st.
Well, then you just become the day... You would either become, I guess, the year older on the leap year day or on February 28th.
I guess so.
I guess it just changes.
Well, thanks for listening again to another Rambling Weeks podcast. And email us at ramblingramsbothams.com if you have any comments about any of the stuff that we talked about, or if you just want to say hi.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.